Welcome back to the Leverage Podcast, where our goal is simple: to learn from the best and discover how we can all live a better life, build a more fruitful business, and be more productive. Join us each week as we interview fellow entrepreneurs, thought leaders, and leading experts to discuss everything from marketing secrets to new technology and life as an entrepreneur. Effective negotiation is a fundamental skill, not only in business, but in life. And today, we're bringing you the man who we all could learn a few things from. Chris Voss is the author of the best-selling book, Never Split the Difference, and has spent the last 24 years as an FBI hostage negotiator and the lead international kidnapping negotiator. On this week's episode, you'll learn the tactics and the strategies on how to negotiate effectively, how to make the quantum leap into emotional intelligence and negotiation, and what 24 years in the FBI has taught Chris and how you can implement his experience in your own life and business.
Welcome back to the Leverage Podcast. I'm your host, Nick Sonnenberg, and we are live right now with my friend, the one and only Chris Voss, author of the best-selling book, Never Split the Difference. If you haven't heard of that book, you should. It's an extremely popular book all about tactics, strategies on how to negotiate effectively. Is it fair to say it's like the current version of, I don't want to compare it to Getting to Yes or Getting Past No, but those are all kind of older, famous books. Is this kind of the new age version of that, or you don't compare it to those?
No, most of those books were just evolutions, next phase, 2.0, 3.0, that kind of stuff. I can tell you something, it's a quantum leap.
Yeah.
We took a quantum leap into emotional intelligence and making it work in negotiation, and there's nothing like it out there.
Yeah. I didn't want to offend you by comparing it to those. I just don't even know what would you.
Those are classics. To? If you read negotiation, you're familiar with those. You got to know the classics, right?
Yeah,
You got to understand Newtonian physics to get to Einstein. It is a leap, right?
Well said. Well, I'm excited to have this conversation. We met through Joe Polish originally in Genius Network, and then we were together a couple weeks ago at Dan Sullivan's Strategic Coach event. And
we're hanging around with the usual suspects, aren't we?
Yeah. And every time we get to hang out and have a whiskey, I always enjoy the conversation. And you are definitely one of the more interesting people, to say the least, at these events. So I'm honored to have you on the podcast.
That's kind of you, Nick. I appreciate that. And I like busting your chops when we're together anyway, right?
Yeah. All right. Well, I've made my own questions for this, which is actually unusual. Usually I just improvise the whole thing, but I asked a few people. There's a lot of people on my team that are big fans, so I got a few questions to start off with.
All right, let's go for it.
So we'll start with the most important one, and this came from Claire and Donna on my team, and they want to know: are you single? Just thought I'd start it off on the important stuff.
I am, which is making this sheltering in place even lonelier these days.
Oh,
right?
Man. Yeah. It's crazy what's going on right now.
Yeah. Again, we can't change the cards we're dealt. We just got to play them well. Right.
Yeah. How are you dealing with that, by the way? You're in Vegas right now. Are you you're totally Brandon, your son, is in DC. Is that right?
Yeah, my son is in the D.C. metro area along with my daughter-in-law. So they got two dogs, and they're little dogs too. So yeah, it's me. I like my alone time, and I start to go stir crazy once I get a few days. But this is an opportunity to isolate. This is an opportunity to read more. I mean, all the stuff that you put off, that's self-maintenance, that requires you to be by yourself, meditation, things like that. It gets forced on you. It's the universe telling you it's time to double down on some of that.
Yeah. Great time to read books. We were just talking before we started here, paying back your operational debt on your company, meditation. Totally. I think
Chance to get better.
Yeah. It gives us some forced breathing room to do things that we always push aside. I mean, It's a bit of a coincidence. I would say your company, which I would love you to explain, it's called Black Swan.
The Black Swan Group.
Black Swan Group.
Yeah.
BlackSwanLTD.com, right?
Yep. BlackSwanLTD.com.
And that company teaches people, it consults people on negotiating both personal and business contexts?
Yep, man. I got, because, emotional intelligence should be used, whether it's personal or business. So absolutely on all levels.
It's just a coincidence that right now you would call this coronavirus a black swan event. So just
interesting point. Yeah, interesting point. Little things that make all the difference in the world.
A lot of people listening know who you are, but for those few that don't, do you mind just giving like a very, very quick version on your story and FBI and all that?
Yeah, I was an FBI agent for 24 years. I became FBI hostage negotiator, was the FBI's lead international kidnapping negotiator. Any American got grabbed anywhere in the world, it was my job to come up with a negotiation strategy to get them out, and then follow on and go after the bad guys afterwards. So I've spent the last 7 years of my career doing that. And while I was there, went to Harvard Law's negotiation course as a student. Even though I wasn't a student at Harvard, I negotiated my way into that class and really hit it off with those guys. Bunch of really smart people up there. Bob Nukin, Sheila Heen, Doug Stone, a whole bunch of smart people. And while I was there and we were sort of comparing notes, they said, you're doing the same thing that we're doing. The stakes are different, but the dynamics are the same. We really are. And so after I retired from the FBI, I got the opportunity to go back up there and be part of the teaching staff, and then just built it into, started teaching negotiation, a couple different business schools, Georgetown and then USC, and wrote the book, Never Split the Difference, along with my son, Brandon. He's uncredited, but his fingerprints are all over that book. He's a brilliant dude, which is why he's in my company. And the book is Wall Street Journal bestseller, top 20 most read, most sold book on Amazon consistently, week after week, 84 weeks.
It's amazing.
It works. The stuff works. That's why the book continues to sell.
Yeah.
It's digestible. It's learnable. It works.
I was going to use the word digestible and very practical. Yeah.
Yeah.
So why did you always, as a young kid, did you know you wanted to be in the FBI, or what was your path to getting to that?
And looking back on it, I think I always liked helping people. I always really liked to be able to help. And, I did a master class. The master class people are phenomenal. And they teased this story out of me at the end of that I hadn't thought about in years. I hate bullies. Being an FBI agent, being a hostage negotiator was an opportunity to go after the bullies. And I don't like bullies. And I want to have the opportunity to go after them. So I think those two things were in my DNA early on. Huh. I think I grew up in a practical environment, a learning environment, and I've always liked to learn. And if you like to learn, I mean, you can learn anything. And if you're open to learning and negotiation is something that works for you, it just resonated with me, and I found myself there.
Why do you think bullying was such a big part of who you are?
Yeah, I got bullied when I was a little kid. I was the most scared that I ever was in my entire life.
Wow.
I mean, guy cornered me twice. And
what age was this?
I think at about 9.
Uh-huh.
And it was the most horrified I ever was in my life. I never felt more scared and more alone in those moments. And, it altered my course, and it made me particularly have a disdain for bullies. And so I'm going after them from that moment on, and helping people that were being bullied has been a part of my DNA.
How did you navigate out of the situation? Did your parents step in, or did you talk your way out of that situation?
No, I mean, I think finally, this guy, the first time he got me, somebody came to my rescue. I mean, there were a bunch of kids that were looking on. He was a big guy compared to everybody else, which, the heart of a coward, if they're bigger than everybody else, it turns them into bullies. And somebody yelled out, a bunch of people watching, just let him go. And so he let me go. And then when he cornered me again in the community pool a couple of days later, when I started to cry, one of the lifeguards noticed and got him to let me go. So both times I was rescued by somebody else.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you see recently that video that went viral from the kid in Australia that was getting bullied? It went viral, like millions of views. Some kids were picking on him, and he was like 8 years old, saying that he wanted to commit suicide because his life was terrible. I'll send you the video. It was really a touching video.
Well, that's the thing, too. I mean, bullies are such a small minority. I mean, there are people around that'll help if given the opportunity, if they know. So, We let bullies cast a long shadow when in fact there are more people out there that are willing to help by 100-to-1 ratio or more than there are bullies.
Oh yeah, celebrities stepped in and were bringing him to games, and I mean, it was really beautiful what the world stepped up and did for this kid. But I mean, it was just heartbreaking just seeing some of these videos.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah. So I have some negotiating questions. I always like negotiating with you because actually my favorite class in undergrad was my negotiating class. I had so much fun in that class, and reading your book and some of the exercises you were describing at Harvard, where it's like you're buying a car and one's the dealer and one's the one buying the car, and
right,
the stereo's worth 12 points, and like and then you have to get, as the buyer, how many points did you get? I had a lot of fun in those classes. So I just geek out just in general about this stuff. Right now, with everything that's going on in the world and everything, a lot of businesses are being impacted by Corona and are going to have to set up to some degree, at least right now, they're going to have to be working remote. And I think it's going to fundamentally change how they operate and be remote. If you were to write another book and we lived in a world where companies could only work remotely, meaning you can't face to face with clients, would the strategies be different at all?
Not really. I mean, we apply these negotiation strategies. We negotiate via email, via telephone, via text constantly. The real problem is people get lazy. They want to send one email. Yeah. It's got 50 things in it. I mean, it's crazy. Every one of us hates reading long emails, and 90% of us, 90% of you hate reading a long email and you write it. And it's astonishing that someone will write an email that if they were the recipient of, they would never read. Their eyes would glaze over. They'd either never look at it or delete it. So what we tell people is email in particular. If you played chess through email, would you put your next 7 moves in one email? No, you wouldn't. You go one move at a time. You can make your email communications extremely much more efficient by, chunking them down. If there's more than 5 lines in an email, you're bordering on it being too long as it is. So you can do it effectively via email, via telephone, via text, via, Zoom call.
Yeah.
You can do it. Take your time. Go slow to go smooth, and smooth ends up being fast.
So in email, though, when you can't hear inflection of voice, see the person's face, how does that impact how you approach the negotiation if you're doing it via email versus over a Zoom versus in person?
Yeah, well, my son likes to say, take your email and read it out loud in the worst possible tone of voice, because that's probably how the other side's going to hear it.
Uh-huh.
So then we'll go back and I'll put "I'm sorry, I'm afraid" in front of bad news, not after. Sequencing is a clear issue. The last impression is the lasting impression. Chances are what you put at the very beginning of your email, the warm opening greeting, put it last. The last impression is the lasting impression. Those are the words that are going to ring in somebody's ears. Tell the truth. Even if it's a contentious negotiation, the mere fact that you're communicating means that you'd love to work things out and you hope you guys could have a long-term relationship that's prosperous. You might put that at the beginning of the email. Whatever you would put first, put it last. Little touches like that. If there's bad news in the email, don't start out by saying, "Hey, I love you, you're wonderful." And the bad news is basically you say, "Hey, I love you, you're wonderful, you stink, I hate you." If there's bad news coming, don't let them get caught off guard by it. Start out by saying, you're not going to like what's in this email. Gives them a chance to brace themselves and work their way through it. So there's sequencing issues, little things like that. You can be very effective in email.
Gotcha. Yeah, there's a lot of advice in what you said is there's a lot of marketing theory in all the stuff that you're talking about, right? Because what you're describing is what Joe Polish, Dean Jackson, a lot of these people, there's overlap in the two worlds, wouldn't you say? Yeah.
I think that's probably one of the reasons you and I are both such a big fan of Joe's. I mean, he's a sharp guy, ridiculously great insight. He's about doing the right thing. He's a phenomenal colleague. I feel lucky to know him.
Yeah, he's awesome. Are you going to remote into the event next week?
I won't be remoting into his next event. I stay in fairly close contact with Joe, and figuring out how to continue to learn from him as much as possible, because he's always got new insights.
Yeah. All right, I got a whole laundry list of questions. Let's just rapid fire through some of these. Do you think that AI could eventually be better negotiators than humans?
No, not better than humans, but we're seeing some data from AI that's really interesting, which means they're doing stuff that human beings could do easily if we just let ourselves do it. A friend of mine runs an AI company, and he says, think of AI as an algorithm as a highly autistic person. So they're only going to do what you program. Rain Man, Dustin Hoffman. I mean, he could count cards in a casino, but he didn't know to zip up his pants. I mean, that's an algorithm. That's AI. So what are the advantages of AI? It doesn't get mad at you. So stop getting mad at people, because what they're teaching AI to do in negotiation bots is not call the other side names. And suddenly there's some data out there that people are beginning to prefer the bots because the bots don't get mad. The bots don't give them a tone of voice that says they're fed up with you. You could eliminate that if you wanted to. Just eliminate that and your angry responses or your nasty tone of voices, and the data on the negotiation bots that makes a massive difference. You could do that if you chose to do it. So AI is just taking best practices basically in negotiation, trying to make them happen all the time. They'll never be able to adapt in a moment like a human being can. Again, the Rain Man example, Dustin Hoffman, a movie way back when. Guy can count cards, can't zip up his pants. Mm-hmm. AI is always going to be that way. It's always going to have some really significant limitations that we as human beings take overcoming for granted. So just those tiny little tweaks in your negotiation approach and you'll get exponentially better immediately.
So is being emotional in a negotiation always a negative?
Well, all right. So it's interesting the way that you put that, because when we talk about people being emotional, we're always referring to negative emotions. When someone says, hey, look, you're being emotional here, it's because you're angry or you're frustrated or you're upset. That's the term that we hurl to describe negative emotions. So negative emotions actually make you dumber. The other stupid thing about negative emotions is when you're experiencing a negative emotion like anger, not only are you dumber, but even more convinced that you're right. There's an old saying out there, give a speech when you're angry. It'll be the greatest speech you ever regret. We get self-righteous when we're in negative emotions. Now, the flip side is with positive emotions, Sean Acker does a great TED talk called The Happiness Advantage, a Harvard psychologist, brilliant dude. I trust his data. He says you're 31% smarter in a positive frame of mind. So positive emotions make you smarter. The mindset of flow, which is where your maximum human performance kicks into gear. Your ability to take in information broadens radically. Your ability to see patterns increases exponentially. Flow is a highly positive state of mind, bordering on euphoria. So positive frame of mind is great. You're smarter. So if you can draw those two distinctions, begin to manage your emotions, you become instantly more effective.
I've seen some people use anger and negative emotions as a tactic or a tool in negotiation where they try to scare you by yelling or cussing. Do you see that as working in certain cases, or in general, that's a pretty weak strategy, would you say?
No, it's a great question. And it's one of the reasons why Never Split the Difference is killing it the way it is. So short answer, the academics will tell you occasional anger is good. The academics are not negotiating for a living. They're studying data. They call it strategic umbrage. There's actually a data study out there that says strategic umbrage works. So you find out about a data study, take a look at how they collected the data before you decide that it's right. They collected the data in simulated negotiations. And here's the problem with simulated negotiations, not the least of which is the fact that people are not in real life negotiations. They're not reacting as they would normally. What's the other shortcoming of data from simulated negotiations? There's no ongoing relationship. We're locked into these negotiations with each other. If you're negotiating with somebody now, you're going to see them again. Even if it's a used car salesman, you're going to see that used car salesman again, because if he gave you a good car, you're going to go back. If he gave you a lemon, you're going to go back. But there's no such thing as a one-off. And strategic umbrage is based on studies of negotiations that were artificial situations and one-offs. And then what a lot of people don't know about artificial negotiations, and the reason why we de-emphasized them when I was teaching it in the business schools, is two people sit down and they're only going to give it 45 minutes, time after time after time. The students would only sit down one time and give it 45 minutes, and only felt like if they failed, if they got no deal. And in point of fact, most business people have come to learn that no deal is better than a bad deal. So not reaching a deal doesn't feel like a failure, and a savvy business person is more than content to not make a deal. Students don't feel that way. They feel like they failed. So they use anger to manipulate each other. They suffer none of the consequences, and they don't ever have to see the person again. Long story short, anger is a bad idea. It puts a toxin in the relationship that just doesn't go away. And great negotiation is about great long-term relationships.
Well said. With the AI, back to that really quick, 'cause my background's in all that stuff. So would you say, though, that one advantage of AI is that there's so much data that it could be processing to look for patterns and past negotiations on the other person, that it would be able to utilize natural language processing and other techniques and data that just would be almost impossible for a human to be able to capture?
You know, we like to think that, and that's what we're hoping for from AI.
But we're a far way away.
Well, and the other problem with, this algorithm, the algorithm analogy, or if I can, I'll extend it to the chess analogy, because AI is beating people in chess games on a regular basis, with certain exceptions. But the problem with that is, on a chessboard, you move one piece, the other pieces don't get scared and move on their own. They all stay the same. AI is predicated on an assumption of fixed constants that don't change. I read a really interesting article recently that came up with another great example of why AI is wrong. And the mechanism of the world is the projections are wrong. And so they went back and they looked at ATM machines. ATM machines are supposed to replace bank tellers. And therefore, when ATM machines were started to be put into banks, everybody was like, the sky is falling, Chicken Little.
Yeah.
Bank tellers are going to lose their jobs, and it's going to be horrible. And this is an example of automation costing us jobs. That was based on a fixed set of constants that wouldn't change. What really happened with the advent of ATM machines, bank teller jobs expanded. There were more bank tellers because it made it cheaper to run banks. So banks put in more installations, and the jobs that called for human beings actually expanded. And with the implementation of ATMs, more bank tellers got jobs, and the market expanded dramatically for the jobs that were still necessary for human beings. So this is, AI is based on fixed constants that don't change, and life is just not based on fixed constants that don't change.
Yeah. In negotiation, there's not like a set of rules or parameters in which like an algorithm is going to be constrained to, I guess.
Right. Life isn't constrained.
Yeah.
AI is a tool that helps. I'm very much in favor of how it's making the world better, but it's not going to replace human beings. It's going to expand our opportunities.
Yeah. I guess actually you could use it as a tool, because I was reading in the book how when you would do hostage negotiations, you would have teams of 5, and one would be listening to tonality and one would be looking for other things. So I guess you could be using it as a tool to be looking at all the data that you have in the database, and let some algorithms give you some score from 0 to 100. How angry is this person just from patterns in the talking, or based off of patterns in the database of words that they're saying in certain frequency. What does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, there would be the tiny little things you could count easily. AI would help.
Yeah.
There's some stuff. I mean, the reason why we had 5 human beings on it was because you need the supercomputer adaptable in the moment that a human being is. So, that's a lot. That's a lot. I'll take a trained human brain over computer any day.
So you were talking about emotions. Is there some strategies or tactics that you would advise if you're negotiating with someone that is highly emotional? And right now we're dealing in, the world is pretty volatile right now, right? There's a lot of volatility and emotions right now in the workforce. So are there some strategies you could recommend when negotiating or dealing with people that are highly emotional?
Yeah, well, I mean, the first go-to move of every hostage negotiator was through tone of voice. Yeah, we didn't know why it worked. We just knew that a soothing tone of voice was incredibly effective at calming people down. I mean, you didn't even have to say the right things, just had a good tone of voice.
This is what you call the DJ voice?
The late night FM DJ voice. Yeah, exactly.
So you just get whatever you want with that voice, huh?
Well, I can tell you, it helps. It helps.
Huh.
What it really does, there's kind of a rock, paper, scissors sequence to emotions. And a late night FM DJ voice is one of the greatest things to calm people down. There's actually a neurochemical response where it's a physical response. I mean, I could calm you down with my voice. As long as my voice isn't condescending, and there's a fine line there to make it not condescending, but it's a powerful tool. And as we're interacting with each other in uncertain times, the late night FM DJ voice is a great way to collaborate with people and get them talking with you instead of at you.
I forget if I think it was you when we were in Arizona last month talking about Chris Rock. Was it you saying that?
In tonality, yeah.
Yeah, that basically if you were to just read a script, it's nothing that spectacular, but it's the tonality that really is what brings everything together with him.
Right, exactly. I mean, he's a genius on delivery. I mean, and his insights, I've always thought, I don't know, he's been around for so long, it seems like you've always thought, he's got brilliant insights into human beings, and his ability to deliver those insights his delivery is genius.
Yeah. All right. So moving on to with emotions, let's take a real life example. Let's say a client emails me right now who's panicking because of the coronavirus, saying I need to cancel. Things are just too crazy with coronavirus.
Right.
What would be a strategic response to a client that's all they wrote?
Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, you got to respond recognition of what they're going through. They're going through fear. I mean, and I did a special 1 hour training for a client friend who's going through this exactly now. They're putting on they took a in-person event, they made it a virtual event.
Yep.
And interestingly enough, they've doubled the attendance by going virtual. But they got sponsors, and the sponsors are getting cold feet. And she sent me a text saying, this is I'll use the terminology. This is rated M for mature audiences only, right? Mm-hmm. Not to catch anybody off guard, but let's be real about the language that's being used. She sends me a text that says, "This is a total shit show. I mean, these people are scared to death. They're canceling on me right and left. I got to figure out, how I can get them to collaborate with me because, this is going to be over, and we got to know where we're left when it's over." So I said, pretty much that's what you say. And so somebody wants to cancel on you, you send them a text or send them an email that says, "This is a total shit show. You're worried about how you're going to survive this. I mean, the world feels like it's burning down around us, and we just don't know when it's going to be over, and it's scary as hell. I know you're scared to death." That's simply articulating people's fears. There's no better, more effective way to get rid of fears than to just call them out straight on. And there's no, but this is what we're going to do. Every time you're getting ready, the word but is getting ready to come out of your mouth, that's when you got to go dead silent. Shut up. Because if you've done a great job of articulating people's fears, you got to let it have its effect. You got to let it sink in. So this is tactical empathy. This is the articulation of the other side's point of view. Whether it's wrong or right, whether it's fair, unfair, accurate or inaccurate, it's their point of view, especially the fears. Call them out as you know that they're feeling them at the moment. It's an incredibly effective way to distinguish the fears, extinguish them.
So you acknowledge their fears, and then do you say, "Well, we're here if you need us," or do we say, "Well, in a time like this, we might be." Do you acknowledge the fears and then try to keep them and do another paragraph about why it makes sense for them to stay, or do you how would you structure? Let's say it's your any company, that the fear is it's not even they just write to you, "Things are too crazy right now with Corona, we're canceling." Do you just acknowledge their fears, or is there another part to the email that you'll put after you do the acknowledgement?
Well, all right. So if I'm putting this in an email, I'm gonna acknowledge their fears right off the bat.
Yep.
Because understanding, again, you got to be careful that you don't make too many moves in the same email because it's just going to go sideways on you. So chances are, I'm going to finish that email with, "Do you want to leave yourself in a position where we can't pick up the pieces when this is over?"
Mm-hmm.
That's a no-oriented question. particularly in volatile times, you got to stay away from the word yes. When people say no, they feel safe and protected. What happens when they feel safe and protected? Their emotions stabilize out. They can think more clearly. They can take their brain off survival mode and begin to contemplate what is coming. And what is coming is post-corona. Where are we going to be left? How badly did we damage our relationships during the crisis where we put ourselves in a position where we can't pick up those relationships again? So I may well end that email with a no-oriented question. Do you want to leave yourself in a position where you can't pick up the pieces when this is over? And I might then just at the bottom put Chris and send that baby. Because the last impression is a lasting impression. The no-oriented question makes someone feel safe and secure and protected. The last impression is the last impression. You want their last thought to be, where am I going to be when this is over? How do I pick this stuff up? That's your maximum chance for success on getting them onto the phone, getting an email exchange going where you can begin to strategize what does survival look like so that we can pick this up when this is over.
That's awesome. That's actually something that a lot of listeners right now probably could take that one piece of advice and really make a difference with the current situation. I thought about this after our conversation. You probably don't remember. We were having lunch when we were at Dan Sullivan's event, and we were talking about first mover. Are you the one to make the first move in a negotiation? And I think what someone at the table was saying, yes. And I think me and you were on the same page where we were saying, information's valuable. So it's better to wait and get information from someone. Is that right?
Everybody knows information is power, right? I mean, that's so true. It's a cliche.
So I was just wondering, is that at all counter to the concept of framing, which is in some respect the first mover move, right? Where you say something and you're trying to frame you're trying to frame it. You make an offer that's just so low, or you're framing something so that the whole rest of the conversation's pegged to what you first did. So is there some, what's the word? Is it not counterintuitive? What's the word I'm trying to say? But is it opposing the first mover advantage, information valuable versus the concept of framing?
No, that's a great question. Comes up all the time. And another one where the Black Swan Group, my company, and never split the difference. We differ dramatically from the academics and a fair number of B players. Now, the vast majority, not all, but the vast majority of the A+ players want you to go first because they've gotten smart enough. They want that data. Information is power. The other thing an experienced negotiator has come across is they become aware of how many deals they've blown by trying to frame early on, and the other side has just walked away. Mm. Now, that's a hard thing for our data-loving or our academically rigorous colleagues. They can't count the deals that have been gone away. And again, they're running their studies on simulated negotiations where people are going to make deals. And they're going to make deals in a 45-minute interaction, and it's a false scenario. And negotiator after negotiator that I've spoken to that's experienced and proven by their track record that extreme positions make deals go away, they all say, oh my God, I hate it if I take a position that's caused the deal to go away that I should have made. And that's what extreme anchoring does. It drives deals away from the table that you never know that you missed out on. And a great negotiator, and I got to tell you, I fancy, my whole team. I mean, we're great negotiators, and we hate not making deals. So we won't come up with an extreme anchor. Now, we will prepare you in advance for numbers. We don't want you to be caught off guard. My company's one of the most expensive companies out there. In point of fact, it's cheap money. But you don't know that early on until after you've gone through it. You got no way of knowing that you're going to make a life-changing deal based on what we've taught you and what you're going to miss out on by not knowing. Mm-hmm. But before we throw a number out, I said, man, we're expensive. I can tell you something. If you need to think twice about engaging us because we're very expensive. And every now and then somebody will come back and they'll say, all right, when I'm in a better place, I'll come back to you. I appreciate you letting me know. What's the last impression there? They feel like I fairly warned them off. If they've got the money, but they've got some doubt about it, then they're gonna think about it, and then they'll let me know if they want to talk, and they'll say, all right, let's hear it. What do you got? And we'll give them the number. We don't like people getting caught off guard by numbers. So we put some emotional framing around it, but not numbers framing around it, because I need to know where your head is.
And I guess if you're to your point, if you're an A+ negotiator and you understand the information's valuable, you won't get thrown off by a weird framing or a weird anchor by the counterparty.
Every step of the way is, what's this person like to deal with? I find people that extreme anchor are lazy. They want to get in quick. They want to make a highly profitable deal. They want to get out and move on. Well, that's somebody that doesn't have a great eye on implementation or long-term relationships. Especially if they're extreme anchoring. They're telling you they don't care about a long-term relationship. And business is about long-term relationships. I mean, the people you and I are talking about, Dan Sullivan, strategic coach, Dan Ambabs, Joe Polish, the Genius Network, are making themselves millionaires over long-term relationships. And so if you're dealing with somebody that's going to extreme anchor on you, what they've just told you is they're happy to cut your throat. They don't care about a long-term relationship. There's a really good chance you don't want to do business with this person.
One thing I remember, we had dinner with Joe a year ago at Soho House in West Hollywood. And we were talking about game theory and the difference between single and infinite games. And one thing that blew my mind when we were talking was you said, I was asking you how the strategy changes when you're hostage negotiating, knowing that it's it's a one-time event and you could just lie. And you told me that no, it's a long-term relationship, even with a hostage taker, because the odds are that you're gonna probably have to negotiate again with that person in 10 years or whatever it is. That was just wild to me.
That is probably the worst myth about hostage negotiation, is that hostage negotiators can lie and get away with it because they're never going to see the other side again. And that is so not true. And even if we're never going to see them again, which is not true, somebody that they know is going to find out what happened.
Yeah. It's
going to hit the news. And I got to tell you something, the news would love a headline, hostage negotiators lie to get somebody to surrender. Or hostage negotiators lied in order to have the snipers kill somebody. I mean, that is going to get out. So, you can't pretend like you can lie and get away with it. You just can't.
I'm sure that you get asked this I'm trying to ask questions and I'm thinking you probably are probably not what you say every single podcast, but I have to ask what was the hardest negotiation, or if you could tell the story of the most stressful negotiation that you had to do? I think that listeners would love to hear that story.
Well, we worked in 2004. We worked a series of cases. Al-Qaeda was cutting people's heads off. What ISIS did in 2012, that was just Al-Qaeda 2.0. I mean, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the former head of ISIS, who has found out whether or not there are 72 virgins waiting for him at the pearly gates, or if he's even going to got to the pearly gates. He knows by now. He was an Al-Qaeda lieutenant in Iraq in 2004. That's where he learned all that stuff from. And so you can see from the very beginning of a kidnapping or a contained siege whether or not the bad guy has any intention of letting people out alive. And you can do your best to try to get them off that killing journey. But if they're on a killing journey, you got a problem. And there were a number of killing journeys through 2004 that 99% chance they were going to kill a hostage. What was stressful about that? What was stressful about that is not only is the hostage going to die, but you're trying to work with this guy's family, and you can't lie to them. They're going to ask you, and I was very pointedly asked in one case in Saudi Arabia. Paul Johnson was murdered by Al-Qaeda on deadline. Actually, they released a video of him being murdered on deadline, which means that they killed him before the deadline. And all indicators were that they meant it. All the indicators were there. Paul Johnson's boss, great human being, was looking out for him. I'm talking to his boss and his then wife, widow to be, in the embassy, and we wanted her to make a public statement. And his boss looked at me and said, if she makes a statement, if she cooperates, if she does what you ask her to do, is that going to save his life? And I said, this may not be within reach. And he looked at me, he said, I didn't think so. I just want to see if you're going to tell me the truth. We'll cooperate with you. So we worked a series of cases like that, and he got killed. And we worked several in a row where we saw the train coming and we did everything we could to get people off the tracks. We just couldn't get them off the tracks. But what happened was,
there was nothing, looking back at it, there was nothing that could have been done differently.
Nothing that we could change in the moment, but we began to make Al Qaeda look bad in the Arab media, which is what mattered to them. If there's good PR, there's bad PR. Good PR for a terrorist organization is to be called a terrorist organization. Bad PR, interestingly enough, is to be called criminals and thugs, because terrorism is a recruiting effort. People will cross the world to be terrorists because one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. Nobody's going to cross the world to go be a criminal in another country. I could be a criminal here. It's bad recruiting. And we killed their recruiting over a period of 5 or 6 months, to the point where they actually put out an edict because it was hurting their recruited, because the media was calling them criminals instead of barbarians, which I always thought was absurd. In the United States, we love Conan the Barbarian, and we think calling barbarians a compliment. But criminal is not, and it shut down their recruiting sufficiently that they got out of the kidnap for murder business because it was killing their recruiting.
Wow, man. I used to think high-frequency trading was a stressful job, but I can't even imagine the stress in that job.
It's emergency room. It's being an emergency room doctor. And by the way, I was watching on CNN today, they had an emergency room doc on, and they said, we go to war every day. These are the people that are on the front lines against the fight against the coronavirus, are emergency room personnel. So I'm grateful they're there.
Yeah. I saw that too. Man, it's crazy what's going on out there. So are there particular cultures? You were talking about being overseas. Are there particular cultures that are harder to negotiate with, better to negotiate with? Do you see different styles of negotiating with people in certain cultures?
There's certain cultures. Let's draw a distinction between bargaining and negotiating. Bargaining is a subset of negotiating. If you negotiate really well, you never have to bargain. Now, certain cultures have become a little more comfortable with haggling, and haggling, they look at it as a sport. They want to go back and forth. They're going to put you through it. They're going to ask for more than they want. They want to give you the flinch. Go like, oh my God, that's horrible. So there are varying degrees of comfort with it. But negotiating is about human interaction. Negotiating is about great collaboration. And every culture on the planet is hardwired to collaborate, because those are the only cavemen that survived. The cavemen that survived were the ones that collaborated with one another. The caveman that didn't collaborate died alone in the dark. He doesn't have any descendants. So since we're hardwired to collaborate as human beings, then the emotional intelligence that we kick into gear in hostage negotiation worked in every continent on the planet. And we take that same skill set, we put it in, the way we teach negotiation. It works. We negotiate successfully globally, and it's one of the reasons why the book's in 30 countries.
So two questions for you. One, so negotiating is collaboration. So does that mean bargaining is not collaboration? Or what is the difference?
It's really not. Bargaining is, name calling, hysterics, drama.
So it's more one-sided.
Nonsense, whatever I gain, you lose, and vice versa, which is what inherently makes it a death spiral.
Mm. When people work with your company, how does it work? Do you have could you explain at a high level what the process is when people come to Black Swan Group and hire you guys to consult? What does that look like?
Yeah, well, we're going to teach you how to slow it down, how to delay to save time, how to, in point of fact, the most highly efficient way to negotiate is to deactivate the negatives and then go to positives if you need to. Most people make a value proposition. Well, that's pitching the positive. It's not that you can't make a deal that way. It's just that it's highly inefficient. You're making a third of the deals that you should be making, and it's taking you twice as long as it should take. So we teach a very counterintuitive approach, and suddenly people find themselves making more deals in less time and actually enjoying it. And so they're like, wow, this is pretty cool. I dig this.
So instead of focusing on why someone should do business with you, you identify all the reasons why they shouldn't or all the risks that they might be thinking about, and you call those out first?
Call them out, because once called out, it sort of shines a light on them, which always, shining a light on a fear always makes it less fearsome. And as human beings, we're hardwired to survive, which means we're hardwired to be overly pessimistic. We needed to be fearful to survive. We're not hardwired to succeed. We're hardwired to survive. There's a very big difference. So understanding that we're hardwired to be negative, and we will always be overly pessimistic despite the data, that if we can deactivate that, then let the data kick in and let the reality of life, which is largely successful, let us make those successes.
Yeah, even when I was trading, the feeling of missing a good trade hurt so much more than the positive of, making a good trade.
Right. So, yeah. Fear of missing out, FOMO.
Yeah.
That's not a recent invention due to social media. It's a recognition of a driver of human nature.
Well said. Question about some of these tactics. So one of the things in the book, I believe it's, would you be willing? That's one of the phrases that you recommend?
No, that's the complete opposite. Are you against?
Are you against? So what could you maybe explain what that's about? So you say, would you be against doing something rather than saying, would you be willing to do something?
Yeah, well, yes is commitment. Yes feels like commitment. Plus, on top of that, people try to trap us with yes all the time. There's some crap out there. I mean, it's utter garbage called momentum selling, or the yes momentum. Get people saying yes,
So you get them saying no.
Right, because it has a complete opposite effect. Okay. Well, if I try to get you to say yes, you're going to stop and think like, wow, if I say yes.
So rather than would you be willing, you would say, would you be against X, Y, and Z?
Right. Some version of that.
Some version of that. Let's say though, that the other people that you're speaking to, say you've made your book, Never Split the Difference, be required reading for your team. If people know about that, can you still use it, or does it take away from the power of what you're trying to teach here?
No, we use it on each other all the time.
You do use it on each other. Okay.
Yeah, we use this on each other all the time. It's a respectful thing to do.
I see.
Now the real issue is, and these are tools. Like, so if I know you're trying to cheat me, you can use my tools on me all you want. I'm going to figure out really quickly whether or not you're trying to cheat me, and I'm just going to disengage. I get emails on LinkedIn all the time. Are you against giving me a discount? Yes, I am. Because you've already, by starting that conversation out that way, you've started without trying to collaborate with me, by trying to take something from me that I got no idea whether or not, you're asking because you're screwing with me. I get nothing going here, but that's a really bad way to start out with, to use my tool to try to take advantage of me. I'm going to smell that really early on. The real issue is somebody using the tools, it's what are they trying to accomplish through their use.
I see. So it's still effective, even if people understand the tools who you're using it with, it's still an effective tool.
Yeah, it depends upon what you're using the tool for. And as I said, we use it constantly with each other.
That's good. That's good to know. That was something I've been wondering for a while. Is there anyone who you wouldn't want to negotiate with?
Wow. Well, I mean, I need more context to the question.
All right.
Yeah, give me some more context.
All right. Well, actually, I'll just rephrase it because we were talking about this. Who do you feel is the best negotiator of all time?
Well, Oprah's up there.
Yeah,
if Oprah's not the best of all time, when you consider how far she's come, the disadvantages she started with, and where she ended up, if you're negotiating constantly throughout the day, then Oprah's darn good at it, and she is, and you are. So Oprah's up there. Oprah's high on my list.
Yeah, and at least when you said that to me, I didn't think of Oprah as the negotiator, but as you explained it, I'm like, man, you're right. She must have some crazy negotiating skills to get to where she got to.
She's done some phenomenal things. I mean, I've got some very detailed descriptions of tough positional negotiation that she's taken with high profile celebrities but she did it in such an emotionally intelligent way that nobody's mad. And one of my favorites is she got Lance Armstrong to come on TV and be willing to answer all the tough questions in a yes/no format. And I've since been lucky enough to have sat on an airplane next to Lance Armstrong and gotten to know him. I think he's a heck of a guy, by the way. I really like him and I admire him. But that she had to negotiate with him in a very tough time. And
Wow.
she negotiated the deal for him to come on and come clean. That was a great negotiation. And Lance Armstrong did not go in the media and badmouth her afterwards, which if somebody is mad about a negotiation, the outcome afterwards, they always talk about it afterwards. Got Lance Armstrong saying bad things about Oprah because of this phenomenal job she did with her.
I never, like I said, would have thought she was a negotiator, but that is incredible and groundbreaking what she was able to do with that. So I want to be respectful of your time. Where can people find out more about you? What's next for you? Are you working on another book? What's in the future plans for Chris Voss?
Yeah, well, all right. So how do they get a hold of us?
Yeah.
We put out a free newsletter called The Edge, comes out every Tuesday morning, and it's concise and actionable. It's not one of those newsletters where you don't know what to read, so you don't read anything. It's got one article in it. The best way to sign up is to text the sign up form function, send a text FBI empathy, all one word, no space between FBI and empathy, not case sensitive. Send that message, FBI empathy, all one word, to the number 22828, and that's 22828. You get a response back asking for your email. Our newsletter is the gateway to everything. It's the gateway to the website, training announcements. It is the gateway to everything we have. A lot of people get a long way with the book and the newsletter alone. Mm-hmm. So what are we working on? We're going to put out some more concise guides, some smaller supplemental books, and we're putting out a lot more online training. And we're really happy with what's coming up. We're gonna engage monthly calls for people that subscribe to our service. However you learn, we either have it out there now, and you can find it on our website, blackswanltd.com. You were kind enough to mention it earlier, or we're gonna put it out. And you learn different ways at different times. And the challenge that everybody's faced with is, since negotiating is a perishable skill, if you don't work on it, you're going to be worse tomorrow. There's no way around the fact that if you don't give it some attention, tomorrow you're going to be worse than you are today.
That's awesome. Well, I just want to thank you again for your time today. This was awesome, and I really appreciate it. And I'm sure the listeners got a ton of stuff out of this.
Nick, it's a pleasure, man. It's an absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
All right.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Leverage Podcast from GetLeverage.com. Please let us know what you think. Rate and subscribe on iTunes. Leverage is an on-demand outsourcing platform that helps small business owners and entrepreneurs scale their business. We have experts that can help set up marketing and sales funnels, your email marketing, podcasts, social media creation, paid media, and much more. Grow your business overnight with a team of experts you can trust to deliver. Accomplish more. Visit GetLeverage.com.